I would like to thank everyone for coming today, and this is plenary number 5 in this conference. We will be talking about agri-food and how we can convert problems into opportunities in agriculture. Before we start, we would like to have Vlario Rosa from Vision Think Tank and Jawid Dana from Chapter Zero. Excuse my pronunciation for names. And Kara Koryu from Polimi to present to us the study they have, and then we can start with the panelists.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. We will present our paper that we produced jointly with Polimi and Chapter Zero on agri-food. This paper was, I will present the problem setting, and we define it from, we define few main problems that we have facing, and I will start from speaking about the impact of climate change on the agri-food sector. In fact, as we know, agri-food is the climate change, so rising temperatures and also extreme weather conditions are diminishing the possibility to grow crops. And we have seen how we have seen how crops land is reducing. For example, in Ethiopia, we have a reduce of fertility land of 85%, and so it's happening in other parts of the world. And climate change, I think it's okay. Because of this, we have a big problem because the population who will live in the further of this century can face a reducing production of food and crops, especially for rice and maize, and in Central Asia and Asia, and it can lead to a big part of the population, millions, to go to starvation. And this, for the security of the agri-food sector, will be a big problem. Okay, let's see what, okay. Next, I turn to the next point. Said that the climate change has a big impact on agri-food sector. We can see also the opposite, because agri-food has a big impact from climate change, and here I will start from the bottom. And I would say that from statistics, we can see that the population in the European Union generally is likely to follow a sustainable lifestyle. However, in the last few years, we have seen a decrease, a 7% decrease, and even more, that it's interesting, in the agri-food sector, so the decision of a consumer to buy a specific product from the agri-food sector, it's less sustainable than in the general way. In fact, we have a 20% gap between the general sustainability to the agri-food choices of people. And from this, I would say that it's huge because, as we know, agri-food is responsible for almost 20% of CO2 emissions, and it's the second after energy. So fuels are the main source of CO2 emission, but agri-food is a big part of it, and we need to face it. Otherwise, it's a circle. Agri-food is has problems because of climate change and the other way around. Also, I would add that from statistics, it shows that innovation and the consumption has an inverse proportionality related to younger age and and the education level. So, just to explain it, the population who is aging, it's more reluctant to see technological innovation in the agri-food, and same for new food consumption, so new food production as gen-modified food. Last, I would focus on the part of farmers and the EU relation with farmers, that it's in a way funny because the European Union has been founded on the carbon and agri-food sector, and the EU is allocating a huge part of its budget on agri-food and environment. And however, we have seen in the last elections a rising level of skepticism towards European policies on green policies, and also the implementation of some agreements, international agreements on the agri-food sector, and because the farmers are saying that this is distorting the market, and they can have enough revenues to survive in the market. And from this point, I will say that it's a huge problem, and we need to understand how to solve it, because we are spending a huge amount of money, but at the same time, we have the streets with people who is unresting, and he's not happy, and they are the bottom part, and who is producing. So if we will lose them, it will be a huge problem for European security of food. Now I will leave the floor to my colleague Chiara.
Thank you, Valerio. Valerio set the problems. Now we will try to understand how to solve the problem if this is working. Okay. So I think I will concentrate more on problem solving, so which kind of solutions are available to tackle the challenge of climate change in the agri-food sector. I think that everybody here agree with me about the fact that there is no single solution. We have to work with a multidisciplinary approach and taking into account the different kind of solutions. Just to quote the three first important solutions: policies, technologies and innovations, and business practices, but the list is not limited to these three ones. I will focus particularly on innovation and technological innovation. Technological innovation is pivotal to tackle the agri-food paradox. When we talk about in technological innovation in the agri-food sector, we are talking about an amount of solutions. There are digital solutions, biotechnologies, digital technologies, technologies for food processing, renewable energies, mechanization, irrigation, etc. This is one of the framework that we have taken into consideration from FAO. In 2023, they have published this work they have analyzed a huge amount of papers and sources quoting the technologies for the agri-food system, and they have found all these kind of technologies. They made this classification. And here you can see from the graph on my left how the importance of particularly of biotechnologies and digital technologies when we talk about technological innovation in the agri-food sector. But if we concentrate on those kind of companies that are more innovating, particularly startups in the agri-food sector, we can also see the predominance of digital technologies. This is an analysis that with the Food Sustainability Observatory of Politecnico di Milano have conducted. Every year we analyze the startups that at the global level who are working for food sustainability, more than 2,200 startups. And you can see the predominance of digital technologies in the solutions that these startups are offering. This is why digital solutions and innovation are pervasive along all the food supply chain to reduce the climate change and the impact in general on the environment and also on the society of the agri-food sector. Here you can see a simplified representation of the agri-food supply chain and some examples of how the digital technologies that are available for all the stages. And there are lots of papers and studies and reports. There are facts and numbers, about the fact that adopting this kind of technology can help the food sector to be more sustainable. For example, just to make an example, using technologies like data analytics, decision support systems, or variable rate technologies in agriculture can help in reducing the use of fertilizers, agrochemicals from 15 to 30%. And you can imagine the impact, the positive impact on the agri-food sector, on the environment, and on climate change from this reduction. But also from an economic point of view, of course, because we have never to forget that environmental and social sustainability are sustainable if there is also an economic sustainability for farmers and for all the actors in the agri-food sector. So if there are so many positive impacts, why there is still digital technologies and in general innovations are not spread everywhere in the agri-food sector? Well, because there is the need to foster the adoption of these innovations because the road is still full of obstacles. First of all, there are some obstacles from the technical point of view, like infrastructure and technologies, but also the resistance to change, particularly in the primary stage of the agri-food supply chain. A lack of awareness about the benefits and the return on investment of innovations. It's very important. This is a kind of job that also, as a researchers, we have to do to understand how to calculate the impact of digital technologies, the benefits or the negative impact that sometimes digital technologies can also have. A lack of competencies and skill and the socioeconomic inequalities that still are stopping in some parts of the world the adoption of digital technologies, but in some cases can also exacerbate the innovations can exacerbate the inequality, the socioeconomic inequalities. So I'm leaving the floor to Gaudiana. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chiara. And let's see. No? Right. Thank you, Chiara, for the floor, and thank you, Valerio and Chiara, for going brilliantly through the paradoxes of agri-food and the potential responses to those paradoxes. Now we come to the role of private sector and corporate governance, structure corporate governance, as we'll see in a minute. Why there's indeed public policies and technologies that brilliantly Chiara have illustrated so far are definitely crucial in ensuring transition, but inevitably private players, regardless of the fact that we are talking about big corporation, large corporation or small entrepreneurs, they are those who need to take responsibility, to take ownership, to implement those technologies, to adopt those technologies, implement those policies, and who need to take the change. Why addressing climate change, particularly in the agri-food business with a structured corporate governance, is so key? Now, it starts, first of all, it starts from the top, which means that if you have a structured corporate governance, you're going to have the business leaders, the top managers, and when the case, the board, personally taking responsibility for the change. Second most important thing, that if you have a structured corporate governance, you're going to have an approach which is proactive and not merely reacting to damages caused by extreme events and climate change in general. Third, most importantly, you're going to base your strategies on a comprehensive assessment and on the innovation that Chiara so importantly illustrated before. Last but not least, this way you're going to make sure that your success is a sustainable one and remain competitive and relevant in the long term. So 4 are the main areas this exercise needs to go through. First of all, assessing the physical risks on the one side and the transition risks on the other side. Assessing physical risk is pretty immediate. This means to monitor how fast and how deeply your business may be impacted in terms of water, land, and resources that you are using, how far and how deeply resources may be impacted by climate change. Assessing transition risk, Chiara has already given you plenty of exemplifications. We are talking here about those risks which are not as immediate as the physical one, but which may indirectly impact your business. Exemplification are those policies that we just mentioned before, like policies on fertilizer or packaging materials, or cost increases, the way energy price or transportation costs may vary, or changes in consumers' attitude, how much cow is consumed annually, right? The second important area is about setting adaptation strategies and setting mitigation strategies. It has the fixing in the strategy of the company how to adjust your business to climate change on the one side, and how to mitigate the emission in a proactive way, how to mitigate emissions on the other side. Here, honestly, I'm not going to duplicate what Chiara was suggesting. Plenty of possibilities to introduce technology for smart irrigation, farming techniques, and observation from drones, or getting data from a satellite observation, blah, blah, blah. All these are technologies which can be the core of an adaptation strategy, sorry. By the same token, mitigation strategies can take advantage of energy efficiency, fully leveraging circular economy, more sustainable logistic, and a new product with a lower impact. Right, in all this, when you have a board, because of course not necessarily you have a board, what's the expectation of climate policies and finance communities with respect to the boards these days? I'm talking about climate policy and finance and communities, but of course for large corporations there are a lot of important directives and regulations which have been reminded this morning, which apply. So what's the board is called to? First of all, to fix the strategy, ideally to revisit even a business model as it was most brilliantly suggested in the opening panel of yesterday, but without necessarily coming to revolutionize the business model. The most important thing to start with is to fixing the strategy to incorporate the climate change issues. Then ensuring disclosure and accountability. So how this is done? By adopting transition plans, fixing the targets in terms of greenhouse reduction, giving evidence of what we just said, the climate change mitigation policies and the adaptation projects, and again, explain what we've seen before, how the company deals with circular economy, pollution, biodiversity, and ecosystem. So there's a big call in terms of transparency and disclosure. Last, but this is an area which have been immensely been addressed these days, last call for the board to engage agri-food stakeholders on climate change issues. And when talking about stakeholders, the first important thing is to fix which ones are they. And in agri-food, key stakeholders include farmers, suppliers, distributors, retailers, consumers, investors, and governmental agencies, NGOs, local communities, and industries associations, and most of them have been named these days. Engagement strategies include promoting dialogue, fostering collaboration in developing climate change mitigation, and getting on board all the stakeholders at all stages of the decision-making process. But I think better than I, the incoming panel can give you exemplification of how all this can be done in practice.
Thank you, Jawdan. Thank you all for this amazing information. Now let me start with the panelists here. I have Elizabeth Jitur from, she's a professor in environmental economic, and I have Camila Lewinley from Lewinley Group and Ferrari Torrento, and Dr. Vebha Down from the Energy and Research Institute. Let me start with you, Dr. Vebha, as you are leaving us soon to catch your flight. I would like to know what's the role you are playing in the Energy and Research Institute in adopting AI technology and biotechnology to improve reducing environmental footprint in that region of the world.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this question. And I'm basically a plant biotechnologist, and over a period of time, I moved into biofuels and climate change and so on. Now, when we look at what is going to be the impact of climate change on plants, and we all appreciate, unlike us, plants are standing outside. They are facing the environment. And most of the time we do a mistake when we talk of agriculture. We simply talk of agriculture crops and we forget trees, horticultural species, which are standing and which are witnessing year after year what is happening to the climate. Now, the role artificial intelligence, like for any other thing, see, we have started doing climate modeling, we have started doing energy modeling, but somewhere when it comes to food, we are only looking at population and the increased food demands. We are not trying to correlate what is going to be the impact, what is going to be climate like, and what kind of crops will grow. Farmer in my country, they say, yes, you give us early warning signals. You tell us that there are going to be flooding, or maybe a week or 10 days before you give us that information. What next? Because I need to earn money. So where are the seeds? What is it you have to give me before the beginning of the season that this year we are expecting floods? So rather going for the conventional varieties, go for these varieties. And that's the role artificial intelligence is going to play in years to come. Now let's also look into, and I'll come to it, biotechnology. It's a very wide term. We are talking of technology as a whole. Now biotechnology, if you're simply doing cloning of plants by tissue culture, that is the most simple kind of biotechnology. Like you have a particular species which is having practically all the traits you require. You want multiple copies, and at the same time, you don't want any disease to be multiplied. You test that mother plant for known varieties, put it under aseptic condition, a simple node, and from a single plant, you can produce almost 1 million plants. This is something which has been commercialized for large number of horticultural species. So all your apple, bananas, they are now product of tissue culture. And in fact, one of the trainings I had undergone in Spain was on orange micropropagation. So the technique was shoot-tip grafting, that how do you free them of the known viruses. So that is simplest form of biotechnology. Then, of course, came the controversial one, where it was, can I know which gene is responsible for which trait? And I can isolate, clone, and put that gene into other plant of interest to me. Like typically what you do is you have one plant with maybe 95% of the characters you require, but that plant is susceptible to a particular disease, water stress, whatever. So you want to incorporate that particular gene, and that one had coined the term genetic engineering, genetic manipulation, but of course that had a lot of problem at global level, and not many crops have been released, and the technology, I should say, it has been set aside. But again, that technology has taught us that you can have genes, you can mark genes what is for what character. We also have gene banks with us. Gene banks is where we have stored all the germplasm. Few years back, and especially in my country when Green Revolution came, it was largely we concentrated on one trait, and that was increasing productivity, because that was the need of the hour. We wanted to save millions from starvation. We even compromised somewhere on the nutritional quality. But we have the entire germplasm with us. Now, through molecular or biotechnology, we can mark that these are the plant varieties which are lying with us in the germplasm, which are tolerant to heat stress. We also have those plants which are tolerant to other kind of stresses. So now these plants can be used as parent plants, and we can go by the conventional breeding, so that rather than testing them again and again in the field, you are just doing DNA profiling, and immediately you know that this might be of interest, so few plants can be tested in the field. So that is the second kind of biotechnology, which is going to play an important role, and it is now being done. And third also is gene editing. And that essentially means that you have one particular gene which is not of interest to you, so that can be knocked down, and therefore your plant remains the way it is, it's without a particular trait. Third is when we talk of diseases. Now, disease is largely caused by microorganisms or pests, whatever. Now, rather than waiting for that population to go up in the field, what you are doing is you are checking the leaves. Is there any foreign DNA? So before the disease become apparent through DNA, you already know, and therefore it is something like spraying at that stage requires much less than otherwise what you will require. Now, fourth, where I'm very proud of the technologies which Terry has developed over years. We know that, and many of you must be aware, that there is a soil microorganism by the name rhizobium, which forms nodules with legumes. Now, very few of us are aware that in the soil, there is a fungus present called mycorrhizae. Now, mycorrhiza is more soil-specific, region-specific, and what it does is that this fungus forms symbiotic association with the roots of higher plants. As a fungus, it releases certain substances which mobilizes non-available form of nutrients to the plant. So immediately, the non-available form of nutrients, they become available. It's great for organic cultivation, but also one is not saying follow that model. Even you can replace anywhere from 25 to 40% of your conventional requirement of fertilizer. So it's a huge thing, and especially today, when we are talking of that phosphorus is going to be a limiting factor for fertilizer production.
Okay, let me...
I'll just put one more point, which is the most important one. And like what we do is we spray a lot of urea on our crops, and it's also subsidized. Sorry. So what the urea molecules, and we all have heard about nano, so that can be broken into very small size nanoparticles. And unlike conventional urea, which is either given in the root zone through urea applicator or broadcasted in countries like ours, and therefore most of it goes to the air as nitrous oxide and ammonia, and then it also goes down and pollutes our aquifers. But nano fertilizer, it is sprayed through drones on the leaves, on the expanded leaves, and within 3 hours, it's 98% absorption by the plants. So it's everything is available to the plant. Nothing goes to the air, nothing goes to underneath water. And it's a beautiful technology which reduces your urea requirement to less than 10%. And that's another biotechnology which is being applied now.
Okay, thank you. This is a really good and amazing technologies, but I want to know what's the how you see the role of public and private partnership here to ensure that this technology will go to the farmers or the smallhold farmers.
Yeah, in fact, if you had asked this question 5 years back, I would have said there is a challenge. But now the drone technology is available. It's very much affordable by small and marginal farmers as well. And really speaking, because the demand is so high, and in my country, we have given license to more than one company so that it can reach the farmers.
Nice.
And fortunately, it also results in reduction in GHG emissions. And one is trying that, will it become a perfect case for carbon credits as well? Because for farmer, it is, why should I change? In any case, I get that 90% subsidy on urea. So that public-private partnership, I'll say that in India, at least, private sector is looking for new technologies, and they want to, and farmers are very receptive towards new technologies.
That's very good to hear. Thank you very much. I know you have a plane to catch now, so we will leave you to catch your plane.
Yeah.
And I will move to
So my
Camila.
apologies and bye to everyone.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you. Camila, we would like to know more about what your company. Can I move to that chair? It's much more
Please,
convenient than the high chair over. Yes.
You're very
I think
welcome.
yes. This is much more convenient. Okay. We would like to know that utilize of digital tools such as AI, Internet of Things, in your supply chain. How do you use it to cut to improve the environmental impact?
Yes, thank you very much for this invitation. First of all, we are a company with a long tradition, over 120 years. We have a very nice 16th century villa, which is like our hospitality center, but nevertheless, we've always been very open to technology because we think that a certain romantic idea of wine just with powder and so on is not what we're gonna look for. We want all the latest technology to make sure we produce in the cleaner and more efficient way. So in recent years, on top of, let's say, normal technology, we also started to use some, both in the vineyards and in the winery, also with digital technology and the use of AI. Something I would like to mention is the revamping in terms of water use, which is probably not one of the major problems here in Trentino, most of all in these days, as you have probably noticed. Yes.
Yes.
No, it's not always like this, but this is not one of the areas of Italy where
Yes.
water is a major problem, but still we think it's a important issue that we have to tackle. So we started a revamping of our irrigation system in the vineyards with a new technology that goes by wireless and allows to be very, very precise on the use of water. This is also a work on precision agriculture that we're doing with the use of drones and satellites, as has been mentioned before. It's still at the experimental level because, unfortunately, when you try things on the ground, it's often very hard. You always find the solution at the right moment. So we started this experimentation with drones. We're not satisfied. We went to satellite images, but even there, the data we get are not so precise, and we also have an issue with, very simply, with bad weather. If we have 2 weeks of bad weather, we cannot stay 2 weeks without any data from the vineyard. So we're still not 100% satisfied, but we keep experimenting on all of this to reach, as I said, a kind of agriculture that can be as precise as possible. We also have a very nice experimentation going on in the cellar with in artificial intelligence for the selection of grapes, which is something which is done manually on the field while harvest, which is totally a manual for Trento Doc, but still we are training this algorithm to support our team in the selection of grapes. The problem why it's still at an experimental stage is that, as you know, an algorithm needs a lot of data to be trained. Yes. But the problem is that we just have grapes coming in to train the algorithm for more or less 4 weeks a year. So we're still not at the stage of saying we can rely just on that for the selection, but this seems to give some very nice results. Something I would like to say on technology is that for sure we have a number of activities and projects, both facing our contribution to climate change and also facing how we have to cope with climate change, because it was mentioned that agri-food is the second contributors to CO2 emission, but it's also true that we're among the ones that do suffer the most. And if I can be a bit of unpolite, it's also true that meat production contributes a lot compared to farming, which has a much smaller impact on climate change. So what is crucial to us today is most of all competencies that we must have in the vineyards, because it's not just about rising temperature, it's most of all about extreme volatility, like extreme factors that we have to face. So being viticulture today in Trentino is much, much harder than it used to be 20 years ago. So we think that one of the major roles is really training people, giving more competencies that do not necessarily require the use of very sophisticated technologies, but competencies are really more and more important.
Yes, you said teaching people. How do you see that role in your company, and what's the tools you are using to educate the people about the challenges we are facing right now?
This education role is probably one of the activities we're most proud of, because we are very active as a company on the environmental issues. All of our estate vineyards are certified organic. They are also certified biodiversity friend, which is another biodiversity I think is also a major issue on which agriculture have to think of. But making all of this in our own estate fields is quite easy. What we are proud of is that we set up a system which includes 8 agronomists and that do consulting and training work for smaller growers. And we also created a protocol certified by CSQA, which is called the Ferrari Vineyard for a Healthy and Sustainable Mountain Viticulture, which basically builds on the experiences we have done through many years in our organic vineyards and proposes them a way of cultivating which is very close to organic, although does allow some flexibility in extreme events. But for instance, they cannot use chemical fertilizer, herbicides, and so on. So we're very close to a very environmental friend approach. And we do this with on-field training. So our agronomists go in the field, teach them and give them basically consulting work. But we also do it by in-room classes during winter time when growers are not so busy. We have classes and really try to spread this culture of sustainability throughout the territory. Just to give you an idea, the growers that provide us grape that are included in this project are around 600. So it's quite a big number.
It's a big number. Thank you very much. Elizabeth, end of the day, this technologies, it's a very advanced technologies, but What it really mean for me as a client, as a customer in the end is how much I am spending, how much I am pulling out from my pocket. How do you see, and you are an environmental economist, how do you see this adapting this new technologies affect the prices of the products in the end? Either make it higher or make it cheaper.
Yeah, also thanks for the invitation. So, I mean, concerning the price changes, I mean, what we can see, right? So, let's talk a little bit more from a policy perspective. I think that's a bit my role here. If we have carbon prices or meat taxes, which would help a lot to change prices in the meat sector and account for greenhouse gas emissions, which is the main culprit of the agri-food sector, then this would lead to change producer and consumer behavior. At the moment, as has been discussed in the morning, those prices or those taxes are very limited, so they hardly steer consumer or producer decisions. But also, what has been mentioned at the beginning, so there's not one solution we usually see, like economic incentives can be one, is one form which is available, but there are many other policy instruments we see. So in reality, there's always a policy mix. There's usually not one solution which works for everyone, and I think at the moment we have a lot of regulation which leads to more transparency in the agri-food sector. I mean, your company might be also affected by that. There's the new reporting directive of the European Union where producers, SMEs have to report their activities, and which most likely will lead them to change some of their practices. There will be a new supply chain directive, which is again an instrument to lead to more transparency in the agri-food sector. So basically the European Union tries to increase through transparency that people, consumers, basically producers realize that they might source the products from somewhere else, that they might source the products from producers which produce in a more ecological way. So this is also kind of part of this policy mix. But I think the most interesting point has been made by you already is, I think the most interesting instrument is education, because what we need is like, all other instruments are bottom down, right? We can increase prices, we can change regulation, transparency, and so on. But I think the biggest lever we have is educating people and closing this competence or skill gap we're at the moment facing. So we want producers to be green, but they don't know how to do it. We want them to adopt technologies, but they don't know how to use AI or don't have the digital skills to do it. So, and I think this is the instrument we should look at it like most, because there's really this big green skill gap, digital skill gap we should address. In a sense, and yeah, it's super interesting to hear that basically your company has started your own initiatives because you've realized on the ground that you need these new skills and you have to upskill or reskill your own employees, if I understand correctly. So yeah, very interesting.
Okay, I will go back to you, Camila. How do you see this new technologies helping on food security in particular? Like, how do you support food security for the country with these new technologies?
I mean, I'm sure the contribution can be great, but going back to what has just been said, as of today, we also see that producing in a more environmental friendly way is also very expensive. Our experience is clear on that. It does cost more. So we are confident that technologies in the medium or long term will help and support to reduce this gap, and so contribute more to food security. But on the long term, we still see a trade-off between environmental production and cost and efficiency.
And do you see your experience can be scaled up or down in different places, not only in Toronto, maybe in different places of the world as well?
Yes, let me also tell you that doing organic viticulture in Trentino on the mountain is very tough. I mean, due to the climate you have experienced these days, even if it's, again, I said not common, but it's much tougher than in warmer areas, for instance, of the world. if I think of viticulture in Sicily, for instance, made organically is much easier. On the other side, it's also true that the fact of having mountains in this region helps us a lot in terms of, let's say, insurance on the future. What I mean is that for producing traditional method wines, the ones we produce at Ferrari Trento, we need a strong acidity, which is something that is going to be missed in many traditional producing areas because of global warming. While on that side, we're fine. We can, in this area, go higher in the mountain and still maintain our standard of quality. So each area eventually has its own particularities, but I think it's always very good to put experiences together and try to replicate them.
Okay. I will end with you, Elizabeth. One more question to you. With the agri-food sector, it's being highly sensitive to climate change and market problems. What kind of economic policy you would like to see in the European Union now to fight the climate change?
It's a bit of a big question. I'm not sure.
Yes.
I should
We end with a
solely
big question.
Focusing a bit on the agri-food sector, I think the new supply chain directive is also a chance because we're always talking about the supply chain directive and increasing sustainability and also social governance, because it should, we look more, have a cleaner picture from whom we get our products, but it will also increase resilience, because if we have a close look at our supply chains and we realize we can source locally, we will also be more resilient, we will be more agile, we will be more flexible. We might even have more trust to local producers. You, I assume, have a lot of local producers, obviously. So this increases economic resilience of every company. So, and at the same time, we can also reach environmental and social goals. So I see the new supply chain directive quite important also, particularly for the agri-food sector, to increase sustainability, social governance, as much as resilience, and will bring a lot of flexibility to those companies. And I think if there's one thing one could do quickly, I mean, you've been talking about carbon taxes. A high carbon tax would obviously be very beneficial. I think, as we all know, it's very unrealistic that we will soon have a global carbon tax. It's probably quite far away, and we have a couple of carbon taxes. They're all very low. Meat taxes is the same thing. They're very, very difficult. Many people hate taxes. They particularly hate meat taxes. So I don't see this coming either. So the third thing which can be done, and I think which is cheaper, we just could decrease a lot of harmful subsidies. We have so many subsidies in the agri-food sector on fertilizers, on diesel for farmers. So we're basically subsidizing bad environmental harmful activities. Let's just abolish them. They will have a very similar effect as the taxes, and the taxes are not feasible politically. So let's start with decreasing harmful subsidies to the agri-food sector. I think this could be a first step.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask you guys if you have any questions. Yes.
Thank you. No, I was really interested by the all comments. Maybe a question for Camilla Lunelli about, I mean, the way you describe in your initiatives is really thinking you are thinking about action today, but you're also thinking midterm, you know, about what could happen. So I wonder really your whole decision-making process in terms of time frame, you know, because clearly you're talking about going upper with the vinegar in case it's needed, and you talk about initiative on water that you might take in today, even though it's not really needed, but you're starting preparing. So you really have a medium-term vision. So I want to learn a little bit more about how you think forward, you know, in terms of what could happen 10 years, 20 years from now, and between now and 2050. We all want to drink Ferrari Trento for when we are very old.
Yes, I think we are lucky because we're a family company, and this helps us a lot in having a long-term perspective, because very often the kind of choices we're facing have such a long impact from the moment we decide to create a new vineyard to when we are going to have the right wine at the right level of quality. It can be like more than 15 years, just to give you an idea of how long our production process takes, and this then requires long-term planning. The fact of creating new vineyards higher in altitude is something we already started to do probably 15 years ago. We planted new vineyards at altitude where 30 or 40 years ago the Chardonnay would have not been ripened well enough. It could not be possible to make good quality, and we're continuing to do so. And something also interesting I see in this process is the fact that, for instance, the last big vineyards we created at 700 meters, around 40 minutes from here in the Valli Giudicarie, were in an area that traditionally was not dedicated to vine growing. It was places where there were like animals or they were maximum growing potatoes. So this also gave new energies to area which were also on the process of being abandoned. We hired just for this vineyard 6 young people from the village that probably would have gone away. So this kind of decision on the mid and long term also have not only environmental effects but also social effect, and we try to have a comprehensive approach.
Thank you. Have another
Thank
question?
you. Yeah, I have a question, like to try to bring another level of complexity to the paradox that when we think about the global market for agribusiness and agri-food, because I just checked the number, there are about 750 million people in the world has hunger. And the way we discuss that, for instance, right now in Brazil, that we have on the other, one side is big agribusiness, highly technological. They hardly have any people working on the ground. It's all with AI and technology and so on. On the other hand, internally about 30 million people hunger. So you see the dimension of the paradox. What can you do with public policies to do that? And my question is that, because here one of the aspects, and it has a lot to do with the EU, I think, is of course because of the import and exports. So in the domestic market, most of the food produced to the domestic market are produced in the south of the country in familiar agriculture. And this is products that are not exported. And these are traditionally much more climate friendly in terms of the also organic. They are normally associated with cooperatives. And then you go to the exporter sector. And these are, again, highly technological, but they are obviously going into the forest and so on. So my question is, if on the domestic market in Europe, how do you see these initiatives? Well, I talk about CBAM, but also the UDR, because I didn't have the chance to bring that in the other panel, but I think it's very relevant. So how do you see the UDR for the internal market? And if you see that that could help also the global level to bring also more positive changes?
Can I also? Yeah. Yeah, it's in a sense it's just the opposite of your question. Camille, Elizabeth. Question number one is what you said about data is very true. You need a lot of data. And also if you use a drone, you need an area which is big enough, to justify the use of drone, which drives me to a question on economies of scale, which is just the opposite of Brazil, because Brazil has got, very big farms. And as you know, in Europe, especially in Italy, the dimension is very small. So I was wondering whether you are at least establishing consortia with other farmers, with other companies, for reaching a minimum scale, to use technologies, whereas you may still have some problem of intellectual property of your own product. No, that's the first question. The second question is more an elaboration of your impolite but very real assessment when you mention meat. This is also about carbon tax, because one of the paradox of agri-food, as an economist, I would say, could be very simply solved by having meat producers, which are quite big in Trentino, as you know, from the lunch that we had, to sort of compensate, you know, wine and you know, and other food products, even apples, you know, for being them for then investing into the technology to protect themselves. Do you see any possibility that there may be this sort of a compensation mechanism between bad farmers and good farmers being impolite within a certain area?
We should have had the best farmer at the table here.
Who would like? You would like to answer?
Yeah,
okay.
I will start.
Go ahead.
So for the first questions, for the first question, I believe that there should be European policies that will address it, because for small farmers, especially in the south, but also in Emilia-Romagna, because I'm from Emilia-Romagna and I know farmers who are struggling because of prices and everything. And of course, small farmers has a big problem with renewing their tractors or agricultural infrastructure. For example, the drones maybe are not affordable because, of course, as we already saw, for having a drone that is able to monitor, we have a data storing that should be done for a year or more. Otherwise, it's futile to have it, because we can't have reliable data on a few statistics. And because of this, I believe that farmers, the small, should be helped by the European level. I think it's the main thing that the European Union should think about. On the von der Leyen should focus on it, and she should find a solution how to have a balance between the green policies and how to avoid to have the farmers that are going to struggle for their everyday work.
Maybe I chip in for a moment. Yeah, just on this, the farmers' incentives, right? Farmers are probably into pig farming because it's profitable and they're productive with it. So I think the European Union, I think there are already subsidies to bring farmers out and bring them into other type of farming, but we should also look at world demand for meat. World demand for meat is driven by consumers, and consumers are driven by their dietary habits. So if there's another lever we should tackle besides now subsidizing another type of farming, either though one type of farming seems profitable, we probably have to change dietary. We need diets to change, and that we need some other policies for that. Again, education will be one of the best, probably. It's a very long-term instrument, but it should be the most fruitful. So yeah, subsidies are one part of the policy picture, but the consumer obviously is demanding a lot of meat at the moment, and that's very difficult to change.
Okay, if there's no more answers.
Well, just one quick point on data and putting farmers together. I think in Trentino, you know, we have a strong cooperative system which actually came to meet the small size of farmers. I mentioned 600 growers we work with, but that's because the average property of viticulture in Trentino is less than 1 hectare, so it's really, really tiny. So definitely to have some technology going down to that level, you need someone to aggregate that. The experimentation we're doing as Ferrari Trento for the time being that I mentioned are just on our estate vineyards. Once we'll be well off with that and sure, our approach is always experiment on our own. When we know how to do things well, then we do propose them to our growers. But we are still not there for the technologies that I mentioned.
If there is no more questions from the floor, okay, thank you very much for this very informative panel. I would like to thank you all, and yeah, we will see you in other panels as well. Thank you.